The Lincoln Memorial, one of the enduring and top iconic symbols of Washington, D.C. Dedicated in 1922, it never closes. More than 7 million people visit annually. Architect Henry Bacon designed the structure similar to the Parthenon in Athens, Greece, linking the defender of modern democracy with democracy's ancient birthplace. Its Yule marble was quarried in Colorado. 36 fluted Doric columns represent each state of the Union while Lincoln was president. Each column is 44 feet tall and 7.5 feet in diameter at the base. The columns and exterior walls are slightly inclined, so viewing perspectives are not distorted that would otherwise make the memorial appear asymmetrical. This follows classic ancient Greek architecture. Each of the 36 states is inscribed on the frieze above the colonnade. Above on the attic frieze are the names of the 48 states that comprised the nation when the monument was dedicated. Alaska and Hawaii were adopted later and honored with a plaque. 2 buttresses with 11-foot-tall tripods carved from pink Tennessee marble flank 87 steps from the plaza to 3 chambers. Another 29 steps descend from the plaza to the reflecting pool. Inside the central chamber is the magnificent statue we're all familiar with. Daniel Chester French was the sculptor of the 19-foot-tall seated figure of Abraham Lincoln, created from 28 carved pieces of Georgia white marble. Urban legend says the face of Confederate General Robert E. Lee is carved on the back of Lincoln's head and faces west toward Lee's mansion just across the Potomac River. Another legend says Lincoln's hands are positioned in sign language, representing his initials, A. L. The National Park Service denies the urban legends. Still, Lincoln signed federal legislation allowing Washington, D.C.'s Gallaudet University for the deaf to award degrees to its students. The sculptor had a deaf son and also knew sign language. So with these facts, it's easy to construe such a legend about the statue. The columns support the memorial ceiling 60 feet above the floor. The glowing ceiling is framed by bronze girders, accented with laurel and oak leaves. Between the girders are Alabama marble panels, saturated with paraffin to increase their translucency, allowing more natural light to filter through. Subtle artificial lighting was added after the monument opened to the public. The interior walls contain many symbolic elements. Perhaps most recognizable is Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. His second inaugural address is also inscribed. The shrine to a martyred president who guided the country through civil war and freed 4 million enslaved persons has for more than a century often been a focal point for civil rights gatherings, including the 1963 March on Washington with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech. We cannot envision the memorial standing anywhere else other than its present location, but it was the topic of intense debate during the planning stage. The wetlands and mudflats of the Potomac River were moved, filled in, and sculpted with decades of work. The iconic reflecting pool lined with stately rows of elm trees was not in place when it was dedicated. But strategic placement of the Lincoln Memorial remained true to original city architect Pierre L'Enfant's vision of a grand national mall aligned along a great cross-axis. Today, we enjoy the views and vistas that are quintessential Washington, D.C. No matter the time of day, a visit to the Lincoln Memorial is sure to be a stirring and memorable event. With the immense popularity of the Lincoln Memorial, few people visit the original Lincoln Monument, which stands about 2 miles to the east. This statue has been considered by many who actually knew Abraham Lincoln as the best marble likeness of him, and it's the oldest surviving statue of the 16th U.S. president. It was removed twice, renovated twice, abandoned for 2 years, damaged many times, and restored by presidential intervention. The Lincoln National Monument was introduced as a resolution by Washington, D.C. City Council just 9 days after Lincoln was assassinated on April 15, 1865. Public funding for the monument fell far short of goals, and the project was scaled down to a monument for D.C. residents. Local sculptor and marble worker Lot Flannery was selected to create the monument. He had been in the audience at Ford's Theater when Lincoln was shot. Flannery created an 8-foot-tall statue on a 4-foot pedestal atop an 18-foot column on a 6-foot octagonal base. When asked why it was 36 feet tall overall, Flannery said Lincoln was high enough where another assassin could never strike him down. Exactly 3 years after Lincoln's assassination, the statue was unveiled in front of what was then City Hall, a building that had once served as a slave market. 20,000 people showed up. City offices were closed for the day. Cannons fired every 30 minutes. President Andrew Johnson presided, while members of Congress remained on the Hill to attend his impeachment trial. Over the years, fingers were lost to traffic vibration and vandals. The entire right hand was replaced. It's slightly larger and out of proportion with the original figure. The Lincoln statue remained there for 51 years until 1919, when the building, now the city courthouse, was to be remodeled. The statue was deemed not to fit in with renovations and was taken down with quiet plans to discard it. This led to public outrage and congressional hearings. Newly inaugurated President Warren G. Harding favored restoring the statue. Cleaned after years of weathering in an old crate by the tidal basin, the statue was re-erected in 1923, in June instead of what is described as April because the new pedestal was not ready in time. The Lincoln statue was removed again when the dilapidated courthouse was closed in 1999. 10 years passed until renovation work was complete, and the Lincoln statue was again re-erected 141 years after it was first unveiled. About a mile east of the Capitol building is the Emancipation Memorial, also known as Freedom's Memorial or the Emancipation Group. The monument is in Lincoln Park. It was sometimes referred to as the Lincoln Memorial before the more prominent National Memorial was dedicated on the Mall in 1922. Designed and sculpted by Thomas Ball in 1874, cast in Munich, Germany the next year, and erected in 1876, the monument depicts Abraham Lincoln holding a copy of his Emancipation Proclamation freeing an enslaved African-American man. The formerly enslaved man is depicted on one knee, about to stand up, with one fist clenched, shirtless, with broken shackles at the president's feet. The face was resculpted to look like Archer Alexander, a formerly enslaved man whose life story was popularized by a biography written by William Greenleaf Eliot. As in Ball's original design, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation rests on the plinth bearing patriotic symbols, including George Washington's profile, the fasces of the U.S. Republic, and a shield emblazoned with the stars and stripes. The plinth replaces the pile of books in Ball's original design. Behind the two figures is a whipping post draped with a cloth. A vine grows around the pillory around the ring where the chain was secured. According to the National Park Service, the campaign for the Freedom's Memorial Monument to Abraham Lincoln, as it was to be known, was not the only effort at the time to build a monument to Lincoln. However, it held special appeal as the only one soliciting contributions exclusively from those who had most directly benefited from Lincoln's act of emancipation. Money was collected solely from freed slaves, mostly African-American Union veterans. Despite the source of funds for the monument, it was designed without their input. An alternative design depicting Lincoln with uniformed black Union soldiers had been rejected as too expensive. The selected depiction created much controversy. Frederick Douglass spoke as the keynote speaker at the dedication service on April 14, 1876, the 11th anniversary of Lincoln's death. President Ulysses S. Grant attended the service with members of his cabinet, Congress, and Supreme Court. Douglass said Lincoln's legacy was complex. He said Abraham Lincoln was not, in the fullest sense of the word, quote, either our man or our model. He was a white man. Douglas felt Lincoln was more motivated to save the Union than to free enslaved people. But in the end, he judged Lincoln on his accomplishment rather than his motivation. After his speech, Frederick Douglass criticized the statue's design and suggested the park could be improved by more dignified monuments of free black people. Douglass said the statue showed the Negro on his knees when a more manly attitude would have been indicative of freedom. Douglass also said the granting of his U.S. citizenship is not represented. The statue initially faced west toward the United States Capitol until it was rotated east in 1974 to face the newly erected Mary McLeod Bethune Memorial, which helped to balance the criticisms and pay tribute to Frederick Douglass's observations. Bethune, born the same year that the Emancipation Memorial sculpture was cast, was an American educator, philanthropist, humanitarian, civil rights activist, and founded the National Council of Negro Women in 1935. Bethune was the sole African-American woman officially a part of the U.S. delegation that created the United Nations Charter and was a national advisor to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Despite the addition of the Bethune statue, the Emancipation Memorial remained controversial. In 2020, members of the Boston Art Commission voted unanimously to remove Boston's copy of the statue that had stood since 1879. Twice, U.S. Delegate for D.C. Eleanor Holmes Norton introduced bills to have the original removed. Although protesters threatened to dismantle the statue, it has remained just as Frederick Douglass had concluded, a testament to Lincoln's accomplishment, put in historical context with the presence of a dignified monument to significant accomplishments by free African Americans.